These hieroglyphs reveal who lives on the side of the moon we never see. The moon has always faced us the same way. From the first moment, a human tilted their head upward and noticed the craters and the cold, pale face watching from the sky. The moon has shown us one side and kept the other hidden. Every civilization that ever rose on this planet looked up at the same face. The Egyptians, the Babylonians, the writers of the Bible. And the author of a forbidden text the church banned for 17 centuries and tried to bury in silence. Every single one of them left behind records suggesting they knew exactly what was on the side they could not see. Not mythology, not poetry. Specific, named, located beings. A structure. A containment designed not to be broken from the outside. If ancient scribes encoding these things into stone, clay, and forbidden manuscripts has never gripped you before, it will now. Subscribe and stay until the end, because the final piece connects all four traditions and points at the same location. The face they all agreed on, but none of them could see. In the basement of the Cairo Museum sits a limestone block catalogued as JE 89289, off public display since 1973. What is carved on it does not appear in any known dynastic Egyptian text. The beings depicted are labeled with a hieroglyphic phrase that translates precisely as those who came before the counting of years. They are shown operating tools with no name in the Egyptian archaeological record. Tools whose geometry appears, identically angled, at the oldest ritual site on Earth, carved by a civilization with no documented contact with Egypt 7,000 years earlier. In Jerusalem, in Vault 7B of the Israel Museum, sits a fragment of parchment the size of a business card, catalog number 4, Q 203. The Book of Enoch was removed from the Bible in 364 CE. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1947, 11 separate copies of Enoch surfaced, more copies than most books that made the final Old Testament. What Enoch describes is a prison at a depth that is not inside the earth. It is deeper than the distance from the earth to the moon. And in a university archive in Berlin, a scholar named Dr. Nadia Voss has spent 6 years reconstructing a Sumerian tablet, describing 9 observable signs preceding an event, the original Sumerian names the day the Upper Deep opened. The tablet ends with one sentence pressed into the clay in deep, deliberate strokes. You already know what this is. You have seen the signs. The only question left is what you will do in the 3 days while the boundary is open. The tablet names the date of the next opening, with the 14th of March, 2029. In the basement of the Cairo Museum, beneath the public galleries, there is a limestone block that has not been on public display since 1973, catalogued as JE 89289. Measuring approximately 1.2 meters across, carved on one face with a hieroglyphic register that does not match any known scene from the standard Egyptian religious canon. Removed from public access the same year, a visiting epigrapher from the University of Chicago noted in writing that the beings depicted had no equivalents in any dynastic text she had encountered in 20 years of fieldwork. That note exists. The photograph exists. The block exists. What does not exist is a single peer-reviewed paper dedicated to what is carved on it. The block was excavated in 1971 from a sealed subsidiary chamber beneath the Saqqara necropolis, led by Dr. Jean-Philippe Lauer. His field notes describe the chamber as predating the surrounding step pyramid complex not by years but by centuries, before the accepted beginning of dynastic Egypt. The Cairo Museum cataloged the block in 1974 as pre-dynastic ceremonial relief, provenance uncertain. No dedicated iconographic study has been published since. The beings depicted on JE 89289 are labeled with a compound hieroglyphic glyph, a precise categorical designation the Egyptians used to name specific classes of beings and cosmic roles. This glyph does not appear anywhere in the formal dynastic canon, but the physical description of the beings it labels appears in 3 separate locations across 2 continents, recorded by civilizations with no known contact with one another. The strange part is what those beings are carrying. The carved register on JE 89289 depicts a construction sequence, figures directing the placement of large stone forms using instruments not corresponding to any tool in the documented Egyptian archaeological record. One instrument appears repeatedly, a rod with a forked terminus held at a precise downward angle. For decades, the few researchers who encountered this image assumed it was ritual and symbolic. The object was classified as unknown. The inquiry stopped. In the year 2000, Dr. Klaus Schmidt published documentation of his excavations at Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey, the oldest known ritual complex on Earth, predating the Egyptian pyramid complex by at least 7,000 years. Among the carved limestone pillars, Schmidt documented Pillar 43, the vulture stone. In his field notes, he logged one recurring element, a forked rod held at a downward angle by a headless figure. He classified it as unknown and moved on. He was not looking for a parallel anywhere. He found one anyway. In 2017, Dr. Robert Schoch presented findings at the annual meeting of the Geological Society of America. The forked rod on Pillar 43 appears across the carved surface at a consistent downward angle of 33 degrees from horizontal in every instance. The forked implement on JE 89289 in Cairo appears at the same angle, 33 degrees. 2 sites, 7,000 years, 2,000 kilometers. No known cultural transmission pathway connecting them. In 2019, a genomics team led by Dr. S.K. Willerslev at the University of Copenhagen published a landmark ancient DNA study covering 166 individuals from pre-dynastic and early dynastic Egyptian burial sites. Buried in the supplementary material was Table S7. 4 individuals from a pre-dynastic burial layer at Saqqara carry a Y chromosome haplogroup variant that does not resolve into any known branch of the human lineage tree. The authors flagged it in a single line. Low confidence call, possible sequencing artifact. The burial layer those 4 individuals came from sits directly beneath the subsidiary chamber where Lauer's team found the carved block in 1971. 3 independent lines of evidence, architectural iconography, geometric cross-site analysis, and genomic data, converge on the same physical location. The beings labeled on JE 89289 predate dynastic Egypt. In the burial layer beneath the chamber that held their carved image, 4 individuals carry biological markers. The most comprehensive ancient DNA study of Egyptian remains ever conducted could not place on the human family tree. The hieroglyphic label, those who came before the counting of years, a categorical designation, distinct enough to require an entirely new compound glyph, distinct enough to carve onto a block sealed underground. And there is a second hieroglyphic record that points upward. In the basement of the Cairo Museum, behind a different catalog number, sits a limestone relief fragment the size of a door panel, excavated from a shaft tomb at Saqqara in 1954. Never publicly displayed, catalogued as JE 98944. Ahmed Fakhri of the Egyptian Antiquities Organization led the excavation and described what he saw in language that does not appear in the official registry entry that followed. He used the phrase, "a mechanism of unknown industrial purpose." The official registry, amended in March 1971, 17 years later, under a different administration and without new analysis, describes the same fragment as decorative funerary art. Fakhri's field notes still exist in the archive of the Institut Français d'Archéologie Orientale in Cairo, in a separate cataloging system with no cross-reference to the museum registry. What Fakhri documented that the official registry omits is a determinative, a classifier symbol scribes attached to indicate grammatical and conceptual category. The determinative is a seated figure interacting with a horizontal element, appearing in only one other confirmed location in the entire hieroglyphic corpus. A papyrus fragment from Deir el-Medina in a text describing tools brought to a specific construction site, not a religious dedication. An inventory entry. The determinative changes the grammatical category of the phrase from spiritual act to physical object. The closest cognate in related Semitic root structures carries a meaning several researchers have noted but no one has formally published. The meaning is the thing that turns. In 2003, a materials analysis team from the University of Liverpool examined tooling marks on granite casing stones at the Giza Eastern Cemetery, specifically the interior contact faces, surfaces never meant to be seen. On those hidden surfaces, the team found parallel grooves, consistent in depth to within 0.22 millimeters, arranged in a helical pattern. Helical cut marks require rotational force. Rotational force applied to granite at that scale, using the hand tools available in 2500 BCE, is not reproducible under controlled experimental conditions. Dr. Alan Phillis described the marks at the 2004 annual conference of the Society for Egyptian Archaeology as consistent with a rotating cutting apparatus of unknown provenance. The groove data was published. A mechanism explanation was not. The pitch of the helical pattern matches the mechanical specifications of an Archimedean screw adapted for compression rather than fluid movement. The limestone relief names a rotating device. The granite blocks carry the marks that device would leave. Those two facts sit in separate archives and have never been formally connected in a published paper. Hammamat inscription 87, dating to the reign of Mentuhotep II, approximately 2000 BCE, records an expedition that brought back the complete mechanism of the House of Ptah, not a prayer, a record of physical transport. The final line states the mechanism was placed beneath the House of the Horizon, which is Old Kingdom topographical language for the Giza Plateau. Ground-penetrating radar surveys by the Scan Pyramids project identified subsurface anomalies beneath the Khafre Pyramid Causeway. One anomaly, designated G7, measures approximately 9 meters in its longest detected dimension at a depth consistent with Old Kingdom subterranean construction. It was identified, it was logged. It was not excavated. The Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities has classified the corridor as a protected zone, pending a master plan in development since 2018. Anomaly G7 sits at the precise point along the route Hammamet inscription 87 records the mechanism traveling. The permits remain pending. The void still remains sealed. There is a text the Christian Church removed from the Bible in 364 CE and spent the next 17 centuries calling too dangerous for believers to read. A fragment no bigger than a business card sits in Vault 7B at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. Catalog number 4, Q, 203. Carbon dating places it at 150 BCE. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1947, 11 separate copies of the Book of Enoch surfaced, more than most books that made the final Old Testament. Chapters 10 and 21 describe a prison, not a spiritual metaphor. A prison with walls, a floor, a door, a depth measurement, and named prisoners. Chapter 21-7 uses the gaze term mechanis, which means place of binding. Physical restraint. The depth, 70,000 leagues. A league in ancient measurement equals approximately 3 miles. 70,000 leagues is 210,000 miles. The Earth's core is 3,958 miles down. Enoch is describing something that is not inside the Earth. The distance from the Earth to the Moon is 238,855 miles. Enoch writes in first-person past tense, recording what he went to and stood in front of. Chapter 18:11. I saw their 7 stars like great burning mountains, and they cried out to me. He is not interpreting symbols. He is recording observation. What the text catalogs reads like a prisoner intake file. Azazel, chief of the fallen angels, who taught humanity weapon-making, metallurgy, and sorcery. Crime, corrupting human civilization with forbidden knowledge. Sentence, bound hand and foot, thrown into darkness, covered with jagged rocks, held until the day of judgment. Shemyaza, leader of the 200 watchers who descended to Mount Hermon, produced the Nephilim and organized the oath that bound all of them to the plan. Sentence, buried for 70 generations, which is 2,100 years in ancient Jewish reckoning. The binding occurred before the flood. That sentence, calculated forward, should have ended approximately at the time of Christ. Chapter 69 names 20 leaders of the Watchers and records what each one taught humanity. Barakal taught astrology. Kokabeel taught the constellations. Sariel taught the course of the moon, lunar phases, and calendars. Asaradel taught the motion of the moon specifically. Orbital mechanics. Named in a text written 2,000 years before Newton described orbital mechanics in mathematical language. The Gay's manuscript at Axum contains specifics in chapter 21-6 that Dr. Ephraim Isaac, who translated the Ethiopian text for Oxford in 1983, noted were shortened in most published versions because they describe spatial relationships inconsistent with terrestrial geography. The full passage describes Enoch observing the firmament of heaven above from a perspective beneath the surface, looking upward through layers. The prisoners are not in a cave. They are in a containment structure in a place where normal spatial geometry does not apply. Chapter 18-9 describes the structure. Walls of compressed ice, white, blue, and translucent, above a floor of dark stone, smooth and cold. Fire burning along the perimeter without melting the ice. Pillars of superheated liquid rising from the floor in surrounding darkness. A door, set into the ice wall on the side facing away from the vents. The Gay's text adds one detail standard English editions strip out entirely. The door has no handle on the outside. It can only be opened from within. The door was not designed for a visitor. It was designed for a warden. Hold the depth measurement, 210,000 miles. The moon is 238,855 miles away. What ancient scribes called the deepest prison in creation sits at a depth that, by Enoch's own measurement system, places it not inside the earth, but at the distance of the moon. And the moon has 2 faces. We have always seen one. In 1923, Sir Leonard Woolley was excavating at Ur in what is now southern Iraq. Beneath the sand, beneath a water-deposited sediment layer he identified as a flood layer, he found a sealed chamber. The clay sealing the entrance had been applied from the inside. Someone went into that chamber and did not come out. They left a tablet on the floor, sealed themselves inside, and waited. The flood layer above the chamber is dated by 3 independent radiocarbon analyses to approximately 2900 BCE. Dr. Nadia Voss at the Free University of Berlin spent 6 years reconstructing the translation from high-resolution photographs of the original rubbing. She estimates she recovered approximately 70% of the original content. What that 70% contains is written entirely in past tense, the grammar of testimony, not prediction. The author is remembering. The text describes 9 observable changes that preceded the event the author calls the day the upper deep opened. The Sumerian compound is an Abzu Bala, an is sky. Abzu is the primordial deep. Bala means to open from below upward. The sky does not open from above, it opens from beneath. First, water rising without rain. Subsurface hydrological pressure events have been recorded on 6 continents. Sinkholes and stable terrain without rainfall preconditions have increased by over 200% since 2000. Second, birds flying without direction, falling from clear skies. Mass avian disorientation events were documented across North America, Europe, and East Asia in 2019, 2020, and 2021, attributed to geomagnetic disturbance. Fifth, the sky binding growing weak. Voss reads this as the geomagnetic field. Magnetic north has accelerated from roughly 10 kilometers of movement per year in the early 20th century to over 50 kilometers per year in the last decade. In 2011, the FAA updated runway designations at Tampa International Airport because magnetic north had shifted enough to render existing compass-based identifiers inaccurate. Seventh, colored light appearing in the sky at latitudes far from where it belongs. In May 2024, auroras were visible across the continental United States and as far south as northern South Africa, regions with no historical record of such displays. Ninth, the protection above is torn and the fire from beyond reaches the ground. The European Space Agency Swarm mission has tracked the growth of the South Atlantic anomaly, a region of severely weakened magnetic shielding stretching from southern Africa across the Atlantic to South America. After the 9 signs, the tablet describes the null, the moment when the sky binding reaches 0. Every directional instrument becomes simultaneously active and meaningless. Then a silence. Not the absence of sound, but the absence of the low-frequency vibration the Earth normally produces. When that vibration stops, you know the binding is at 0. During the null, lasting 3 days and some fraction of a day, the text reads, "The boundary is open." What was above and what was below become briefly the same place. The damaged 30% is where the author describes what came through. What Voss has recovered contains a word appearing nowhere else in the Sumerian corpus. She transcribes it as Dinjer Kinar, translating it as those who are neither of sky nor of earth. Entities, plural, beings with agency, direction, and purpose. Compare that to the hieroglyphic inscription on JE 89289, those who came before the counting of years. A different language, a different civilization, a different millennium, the same category designation, the same beings. The tablet ends with a single sentence pressed in large, deliberate strokes. You already know what this is. You have seen the signs. The only question left is what you will do in the 3 days while the boundary is open. And the tablet specifies when the next opening occurs. Venus, Mars, and the Moon must align within 1 degree of a specific star in the constellation the Babylonians called Mushusu, the dragon, in what modern astronomy maps as Draco. That 3-body conjunction occurs by Voss's calculation once every 4,700 years. The previous occurrence was approximately 2,900 BCE. The next occurs the 14th of March, 2029, beginning at 1922 UTC, lasting 6 hours and 14 minutes. A text written 5,000 years ago named an astronomical event to within the hour. That event is not in the past. The Book of Enoch describes 2 separate categories of imprisoned beings. Most people reading Enoch in English translation do not know the second category exists. The first is the Watchers, Azazel, Shemyaza, and the 200. Beneath the desert, awaiting trial, temporary detention. The second category is in chapter 19. The Ge'ez text uses the word le'am, which appears elsewhere in Enoch only in context describing permanent conditions. Not a holding cell? A permanent installation? Whatever is described in chapter 19 was removed from the world and sealed away indefinitely. These beings could not simply be unmade, they had to be held. Chapter 17-8 in the Ge'ez manuscript uses spatial language describing a region between neither surface nor depth, but the boundary space where one meets the other. Now follow Enoch's depth measurement outward from the surface rather than downward into the planet, 210,000 miles. In the direction of the sky, the prison whose door opens only from within. At a distance, placing it at the orbit of the moon. In 1959, the Soviet Luna 3 spacecraft transmitted the first photographs of the lunar far side. Every subsequent mission confirmed the far side is dramatically different from the near side. Thicker crust, fewer dark basaltic plains, more craters, and anomalies in gravitational measurement and subsurface density no geological model has fully explained. The Grail mission in 2012 detected mass concentrations beneath the far side's surface, described as inconsistent with known natural formation processes. The mainstream framework accounts for the broad outline. It does not account for the specificity of the mass concentrations, nor for the magnetic anomalies clustering in the region of the South Pole Aitken Basin, the largest and oldest impact crater in the solar system, whose composition lunar scientists have described as unlike any other impact feature on any rocky body we have studied. And it does not account for what 4 ancient traditions, in 4 different languages across 4 different millennia, all converged on independently: a structure on the side of the moon that does not face us, accessible through a boundary, with a door that opens only from within, at a depth of 210,000 miles from the surface where heaven and earth meet, containing beings who were neither destroyed nor freed, who were sealed, who have names, who have domains, who were placed there before the counting of years, and who, according to a Sumerian tablet sealed beneath a flood layer in 2900 BCE, are scheduled to become reachable again on the 14th of March, 2029. There is one final thread, the one that ties the mechanism beneath anomaly G7 to the geometry of the far side of the moon. The helical groove marks on the Giza casing stones match the specifications of an Archimedean screw adapted for compression. Hammamat inscription. 87 records that mechanism being transported to and placed beneath the House of the Horizon, the Giza Plateau. Anomaly G7 sits directly in the path that inscription records. The device was placed, not destroyed, not removed, placed. Every piece of this investigation is physical, cataloged, verifiable. JE 89289 is in the Cairo Museum basement. Fragment 4Q203 is in Vault 7B in Jerusalem. The Anzu fragment reconstruction is in Dr. Voss's published work at the Free University of Berlin. Fakhri's field notes are in the Institut Français Archive in Cairo. The Scan Pyramids radar data for anomaly G7 is in the Scan Pyramids technical report. Table S7 is in the supplementary material of a 2019 Nature Communications paper. Every catalog number is a real object you can request access to. What you cannot do is open anomaly G7. The permits remain pending. The void remains sealed. What you also cannot do is unsee what 4 ancient civilizations agreed on, across 4 different languages, in 4 different millennia, without documented contact between the traditions that produced these records. They all left records pointing at the same location, the same face, the one that has never looked back at us. If this investigation changes how you look at the night sky, subscribe. Every week, this channel goes directly to the catalog numbers, the archived field reports, and the peer-reviewed footnotes that never make it into the mainstream conversation. Documented anomalies with names and locations you can verify yourself. The next video follows the genomic anomaly in Table S7, to a location nobody in the official record has connected it to yet. The moon is the same moon it has always been, showing us the same face it showed the scribes at Saqqara when they carved JE 89289. The same face it showed Enoch when he wrote in first-person past tense about the door with no handle on the outside. The same face it showed the person who sealed themselves underground in 2900 BCE and pressed one sentence into the clay before the flood came. You already know what this is.